So last week we finished up our Make War series, and to be completely honest with you, had another series lined up and kind of planned out, outlined, but the more that I got into it, the more I realized that wasn't where we were supposed to be. And so we scrapped it. We threw it out. We said, you know what, this isn't where we're at. And so Monday, we sat and talked as a staff. And it's kind of funny how sometimes God knows what He's doing. I don't know if you figured that out yet, but sometimes he knows what He's doing, and we just need to shut up and listen. And so we did that. And this week, as we were studying, I figured out why we didn't do what we did, or what we were going to do. We're going to start a series today called Galatians. I know, super creative, super original, but that's where we're at. We're starting a series called Galatians, which is a book in the Bible. In the New Testament, it's a letter. And so we're going to start this series, and we're going to unpack a letter that was written years ago, but it's still very relevant today. By show of hands, and wait till I'm finished before you raise your hand. This past week, how many of us sent a letter, sent an email, sent a Facebook message, made a phone call of some kind to someone? How many of us completed one of those tasks? Okay, some of us talked to no one. Okay, we just hit it in positively. Good. Most of us, we communicated with someone for some reason. All right, we called them, we sent an email, we sent a letter, we sent a text message, Facebook message. And the reason that we did that was because we had information that we needed to relay to them. That we thought that it was important enough for them to hear and understand, correct? I mean, that's why you send an email. And maybe for your job. And maybe it's for your job. And the person that I'm working with, they need to receive this email so they can complete the task that they need to complete. And so we send that information. Maybe you're just writing a letter, writing an email to someone, or sending someone an encouragement note. And you take time because you feel like they need to know that information. And Paul, who was one of the first church planters, okay, one of the first guys to start churches, oftentimes, after he would start a church, he would move to a different area. He would learn of something going on in one of the previous churches, and he would write them a letter. Why? Because there was information that they needed to hear about. There was information that they needed to know about. And so as we start this series, and the letter that he writes to the church in Galatia, and they were struggling with something. We're going to find out about here in a minute. And the church in Galatia, they were struggling with something, and that years ago was an issue. And even today it's an issue. I want to pray, we're going to find out what that is. Father in heaven, I'm thankful for your church. I'm thankful for people that we can get together and we can worship you and we can laugh. We can enjoy being with one another. Father, I'm thankful that we can learn your word together. God, I pray this morning that as we embark on this journey through this letter, through this book, your word says that Scripture is used for teaching, correcting, rebuking, training. And we pray that that happens this morning. Father, I pray that you hear your word for what it is. Father, it will change us, mold us. God, I pray that, Father, we will not be offended by it. And if we are, God, we will recognize that it possibly is your Spirit trying to change something in us that's not like you. Father, we are thankful for your grace and your mercy. We're thankful for the cross. We pray. Amen. Sometimes in our house, I enjoy cooking. Okay, sometimes, not all the time. Okay, but there are some times that I enjoy it. But here's the deal. I, like other gentlemen, so I've heard, okay, I can't just make something how it's supposed to be made. Okay, I've got to tweak it somehow. I've got to jazz it up somehow. I've got to make it more enjoyable somehow. And even though the regular recipe, there's a reason that recipe makes it on the back of the box and not mine. Okay, I don't care. All right, I'm gonna figure something else out. When I made pancakes the other day, it can't just be regular pancakes. With a little cinnamon and a little bit of vanilla, and Emily's like, whatever, just make the food. Okay, she does not always enjoy when I cook, and it's not that she doesn't enjoy what it tastes like. Most of the time, she likes what it tastes like. What Emily does not enjoy is when I cook. Is the war zone that her kitchen becomes, okay? And I don't try to make make a mess in the kitchen when I cook. It just happens. I don't know. I'm not sure what happens. But when I get done, it looks like a bomb went off in the kitchen. And so it's not that she doesn't appreciate what it tastes like. She just doesn't like the mess that I leave. And the reason that there's so much of a mess is oftentimes because of the different stuff that I'm adding in. It can't just be fried chicken. We gotta add this and this and this, and then make it. I love frying chicken wings. Growing up in Buffalo, I love doing that. But just regular chicken wings with the buffalo wing sauce, that's boring to me. Okay, I've done that, had that my whole life. Trying to figure out something else, which means, we're going to pull this out of the cabinet, and this out of the cabinet, and this out of the cabinet. We're going to spill this over here. And she walks in, and when she finds out that I'm doing this, it's like a sigh is let out of her house. It's like air is let out of her. Oh. And she goes back in, and she just lets it happen. She knows that it's just going to be mayhem in the kitchen. She comes back in, and she often does it. She goes, "What are you doing?" All right? She says it in the most loving, compassionate, supportive way. "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm doing this." She goes, "Why?" And I oftentimes don't know the why. Right? And sometimes we'll get done, and she'll be like, "Why did you use 3 pots for that?" I'm like, "I don't know, but I did, and it's done, and it's cooked, and let's eat it." Whatever, And I get done, there's this mountain of dishes. Sometimes when I get done, there's a mountain of dishes. Sometimes they're dirty still. But anyway, that's why she gets upset, because of the mess that's left, because of all the different ingredients that I add, trying to spice things up or whatever. You see, and that's exactly where this early church is at. They're a mess. This early church in this region of Galatia, they're a mess because there's a group of people that have come in and they have tried to add all of these different ingredients and all of these different details and all of these extra steps into following Jesus. And as these people move in, it just leaves things a mess. And Paul gets word of this, and he writes the letter of Galatians. You see, the region of Galatia, it wasn't just like this is to one specific, tiny church. When Paul writes to the Galatians, there possibly could be several churches involved in the region of Galatia. It would be like if someone wrote a letter to the Christian churches of Northeast Missouri. Well, there are several churches in our area, within 10, 15, 20 miles, in our area, in our region, and it would be a letter for all of us to read. Because Paul, he took a part in planting all of these churches in this region. So he knows the struggle that's taking place in these churches, so he writes them a letter. Before we go any further, there are a couple of terms that we need to all get on the same playing field with. Okay, because they're going to keep showing up throughout this series. The first term that we need to get on the same playing field with is the term Judaizers. Okay? And I know it sounds like a big crazy word. Here's why we need this, is because these are the people that are infiltrating the early church. Okay? Judaizers. And what this means is that they're a group of Christian people that following Jesus isn't enough. And so they are going to add a whole bunch of rules from the Old Testament and pack that into following Jesus. Okay? And they're warping this idea of following Jesus with all of these rules, all of these extra steps. And so they are moving into the church and making it hard for people to understand who Jesus is and what he's about. The second phrase that we all need to understand together is the term gospel. Okay, gospel. Okay, this is the life of Jesus lived out. The message of Jesus lived out. When we read those, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we read the story of Jesus lived out. It's the message of the life of Jesus, the life, the death, the resurrection of Jesus. That is the gospel message. And so when Paul writes about the gospel, that's what he's referring to. And so we have the Judaizers, they're the ones messing things up. We have the gospel, that is the truth and the life of Jesus. And here's the last phrase. The last phrase is legalism. The last phrase is legalism. And here's what this word means. The word legalism is the doctrine that salvation, us being saved, is based on rules, works, and conduct. That it's not about Jesus and the cross. It's about us doing all of these right things. And jumping through these right hoops. And as this group of people moves into this early church, they begin to mess up the church as Paul left it. They begin to tell a different story about what salvation is about. And they start to complicate what Paul taught them about who Jesus was. So as all of this is taking place, Paul writes this letter. Okay? In Galatians chapter 1, probably can flip there. Galatians chapter 1, Paul introduces himself, gives a pretty typical greeting. Says, grace and peace to you. And he wishes them grace and peace, tells them that he loves them, and then he jumps right in. And there's not much. There is no fluff at the beginning of this letter. Okay, there's no, hey, how are the kids? How was vacation? Haven't talked to you in a while. Hope things are going well. There's none of that. Okay? He just jumps right in. And this is what he says. We're going to start in verse 6 today. He says, I'm astonished that you so quickly are deserting the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all. Evidently, some people are throwing you into confusion and trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. But even if we, or an angel from heaven, should preach a gospel other than the one we preach to you, let them be under God's curse. As we have already said, and now I say again, if anybody is preaching to you a gospel other than that, what you accepted, let them be under God's curse. Verse 10. Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. Now, Paul writes this letter, and right from the get-go he says, what are you doing? How is it that you're just walking away from this? We spent time learning this, and you spent time understanding this, and now you're just deserting. Deserting it, completely walking away from, not just, wondering or questioning, deserting the gospel, the truth of who Jesus is. You're completely walking away from it. I'm astonished, I'm amazed, I'm shocked that you can so quickly just walk away from the truth of who Jesus is. You see, these people come in and they say, hey, we know that you've given your life to Jesus. We know that you trust in who Jesus is, but there's also a few more steps you need to take. And that's where things get messed up. That's where the distortion comes. That's where the perversion comes that Paul talks about. He says, wait a minute. No, there's no extra steps in this. It's following the life of Jesus. It's surrendering to the life of Jesus. There's no extra hoops. There's no extra steps. But this group of people, they're coming into the church and they're saying, no. Not only do you need to believe in Jesus, but you also need to follow a bunch of the laws that you used to follow. Paul says that's not gospel at all. That's not the message of Jesus. Following all of these rules, that's not the gospel message. How is it that you're walking away? And then he just drops the hammer. He says, listen, if anybody is preaching you something different than the gospel truth of who Jesus is, let them be under God's curse. Listen, I'm here to tell you, there's a lot of places that I would rather be than under God's curse. All right? I'll conquer my fear of heights. I'll go up to the tallest building. I'll root for the Cardinals. I don't care. There's a lot of places that I would rather be than under God's curse. That should show you right there. That's the severity match. Rooting for the Cardinals, God's curse. They're close. But whatever. There's a lot of places that I would rather be than under God's curse. He says, listen, if they're perverting things, if they're messing things up, if they're pulling you away from the gospel truth of who Jesus is, if these people are making it more difficult for people to find Jesus, then it's not even gospel at all. He says, church, how are you walking away from this? How is it? How is it that you're deserting the truth of what we preach to you? You see, this group, these early Judaizers, they're saying, no, is it that the early church in Galatians, why is it that they're walking away? Like, what is it that's so enticing that's getting them to just step away from the truth? Well, you see, the truth of the gospel of Jesus, I don't know if you figured this out, it's not always easy. It's never promised to be easy. I mean, having to trust and having to be faithful to a God that, we can't audibly talk to, we've never seen, but we're supposed to trust with our life that He's got a plan, that, He's got things figured out. At times, that's difficult, right? Because we don't control that. That's out of our control. But if all of a sudden someone steps in and says, hey, you might have a little bit more control than you think. Because if you obey these rules, and if you follow all of these steps, and if you don't do a lot of bad things, then you'll find salvation. Now all of a sudden that's in their control. Now all of a sudden they get a say over that. Now all of a sudden that looks appealing because I can fit that into my schedule. I can fit that into my box instead of me having to step and trust in God's box. And so while one is faithful, this form over here is easier for me. And so I'm going to walk away, I'm going to drift away from faithfulness and trust, and I'm going to step over here into this form that I can control. And the hard part is we think we can control it, but it burdens. There's no freedom found in a whole bunch of rules. And it perverts the gospel of Jesus. It tears us away from the freedom that's found in being rescued and saved from Jesus. He says, that's no gospel at all. A complicated, step-oriented, works-driven approach towards Jesus, that's not a gospel. But how often do we do this? I was talking to a guy in my small group. He said, man, I've been working on some of the guys that I've worked with, and they're kind of rough. I've been working on trying to get them to come to church with me. I was like, man, that's great. I'm excited about that. He said, yeah. He said, I'm running into some roadblocks, though. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, well, I was talking to a guy the other day, and he said, I said, you should come hang out with me on Sunday mornings, go to church with me. And his response back was, I'd love to, but I don't have nice enough clothes to come to church with you. You see, the only way that he would get that idea is if the church has someplace along the way, not just this church, but the church as a whole, if someplace along the way, the church has somehow given him the idea that he needs to dress a certain way in order to come to church. That's an extra hoop, an extra step, and not the gospel. He said, man, I got another guy, he said he works down from me a little bit. He said, I said to him one time something about church. He said, no, he said, I'm too dirty to come to church with you. Which means that someplace along the way, the church has given this idea, whether verbally or non-verbally, that you have to clean yourself up before you come to church. Which is an extra hoop, an extra step, and more difficult to get to the cross. Which is no gospel at all. He told me about the third guy. He told me about the third guy that he was talking to, and his response was, I've done too much bad. Which means that someplace along the way, the church has given this idea that only good people get to go to church. Or that you have to be so good in order to get to go to church. Which is an extra step, an extra hoop. And that is no gospel at all. That's legalism. Which is no gospel at all. You see, it's not the truth of Jesus. It's extra steps. It's like saying to people, yeah, you can come follow Jesus if you do this, 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 and this. And I never heard Jesus say that other than pick up your cross and follow me. Jesus never gave us a dress code. Jesus never told us that we had to wash ourselves up and clean ourselves up. He didn't tell us any of that. But how often do we preach that? You see, sometimes we make it so difficult for people to get to the cross that they don't want anything to do with it. We have instituted hoops and pushed people away from the church. But we have said, you need to dress this way and be this way in order to come to church with me. And maybe we don't believe it, but that's how we live. And Paul says that's no gospel at all. He says the gospel is, there's only one gospel. There's only one Jesus lived out. There's only one life of Christ. He did a good job at it. You see, the truth of this morning, as Paul begins this letter, is God is looking for our obedience, not our opinions. God is looking for our obedience to follow the gospel, not our opinions about how it should be carried out in His church. And Jesus already lived it out. He did a perfect job. He doesn't need our opinions on how to fix it. And the people that are moving into this early church in Galatia, they're saying, yeah, Jesus did this, but here's how you need to add a little bit more spice to it. And Paul says, there's no more spice needed. It's perfect how it was. Quit making it so difficult for people to get to the cross of Jesus Christ. Amen. Quit making it so hard. Quit creating hoops for people to jump through. There is only one gospel, and it's open for everybody. Everybody. I'm afraid that sometimes we limit where the gospel goes because of where we're comfortable at. And sometimes I'm afraid that although we don't believe it, although we say, yeah, the gospel goes to the ends of the earth, yeah, we're going to go share it with everyone. Unless we're a white, heterosexual Republican who dresses up and follows all the rules, then we don't get the gospel. But guess what? That's no gospel at all. That's all extra hoops that we have added in order to get to the cross. And Paul says, that is no gospel. And then he sums it up with verse 10. He says, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Am I trying to please people? And here it is. If I am still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. I mean, we could say amen right here and leave. If we are living our lives to win the approval of people, that means that we are not a servant of Christ. There's no gray there. I don't know if you picked up on it. That's as black as white as you can get. If we are trying to please people, then we are not a servant of Christ. If we are living our lives trying to live up to this reputation that people think that we should have, then we are no longer a servant of Jesus Christ. We can only carry one bag. It's either self or Savior. There's no other bags to carry. And we can only carry one bag at a time in obedience. So the question is, are we giving God our obedience, or are we giving Him our opinion? Because God's looking for obedience. He's not looking for our opinion. Paul looks at this early church. He says, why are you not obeying the gospel truth? There's only one. Why are you complicating it? Why are you letting the opinions of others infiltrate the camp of the cross and rid us of the grace and mercy that it provides? God is looking for our obedience, not our opinions. Well, I don't think I give my opinion the church and just ask us. Church, are you feeding my sheep? Well, yeah, I am, but, sometimes people are kind of difficult, and so, I don't really mess with those people, because they just drive me nuts. But, these over here, well, those I am. You see, God's looking for our obedience, not our opinions. But Reagan right now she is a mighty, strong-willed 7-year-old. She is finding her voice in our home. And Reagan she has entered, in the past few weeks, she has entered a stage where she feels as though her opinion is always valued and always needed. Like when we say, Reagan, go clean your room. Reagan now feels, right now in this stage, she needs to share her opinion about cleaning her room. Which is not what we're asking for. Okay? We're not asking, Reagan, I love you. I'm not asking for your opinion about going to clean your room. I just want you to go clean your room. And the other day, I came home for lunch, and I was sitting on the couch eating my sandwich. Reagan and Levi were playing on the floor. I don't know what they were doing. But Emily said to Reagan, Reagan, did you clean your room like I asked you to? Reagan says, I did halfway. And then she follows it up with, she said, I did it halfway, but then Levi asked me to help him, and I wish I could make this up, but I'm not. She goes, but being a good sister, I read and it was like, I'm just watching her like just plummet in this conversation, just waiting for Emily to respond. In the back of my head, I'm also praying, that let her live through this, one of those type things. And she said, but being a good sister that I am, I went and helped Levi, and so I didn't make it back. And Emily says, I don't care. Reagan, did you clean your room? And she said, well, I did part of it. I did. And she said, did you clean your room? No. Emily says, then get up and clean your room. Well, I will, but it's almost lunchtime. At that point, there's like steam, weeping and gnashing of teeth, and it's a bad deal, And I said, Reagan, you better get up and clean your room right now. Right? And she finally went upstairs and cleaned her room. But all the while, she just gave her opinion over and over and over again. It's like, Reagan, I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm asking for you to go clean your room. And I wonder how many times God looks down on his church and thinks the same exact thing. Are you going and making disciples and teaching and preaching and baptizing? Well, I was going to, and I want to, but my neighbor ran the house so fast the other day that I didn't get a chance. And I was sitting at the ball game thinking to myself, I really should invite this person, to this next thing we have at church, but it never came up in conversation. And I don't know enough to actually baptize someone, and so I probably can't do that. And God looks at his church and he says, no, I'm not asking for your opinion of why you're not. I'm asking, are you? Are you living in obedience, or are you just sharing your opinion? Hey church, are you loving people who are different than you? Well, sometimes. But sometimes people are so different that I just don't understand where they come from. I don't understand how they could live that lifestyle. And so, because I don't understand it, I don't associate with them. Jesus says, I don't care about your opinion. I'm asking if you're being obedient and loving people who are different. Church, are you giving up sin and selfishness in order to surrender your life and be saved by the grace of Jesus? Well, God, yeah, I'm surrendered to the grace of Jesus because, man, it makes me feel good and forgiven. But the sin part, I'm trying, God, but, there's just some things that are fun, and I like being in control of this. And he says, I don't care. Are you living life in obedience to the gospel truth of who Jesus is, the life, the death, and the resurrection of the King and the Creator of everything? Or are you just sharing your opinions and your thoughts about Him, His cross, and His church? God is looking for our obedience. He's not asking for our opinions. Are we living obediently in the shadow of the cross? Or are we walking there so we feel good, but telling God where his cross needs to be the whole time? God is looking for our obedience to his gospel truth. Not our opinions with a whole bunch of extra loops and a whole bunch of extra steps and making it harder for people to get to the cross. If how we live our life and how we run church, how we do church together, if it makes it harder for people to get to the cross of Jesus, then we're doing it wrong. Paul says there is only one gospel. It's the truth of Jesus. It's the life of Jesus. And it's surrendering our life to him. And we are either obeying that or we are just giving our opinions